from the Washington, D.C. area. It's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a pretty serious show this evening. In the news, you've probably heard Governor McAuliffe here in Virginia is pushing forward some gun safety measures. And there's been a big firestorm surrounding that. He promised it in the election, and he's delivering. Tonight I have a bunch of people, a good panel. But first I wanted to bring on someone that's very much familiar with this issue. Lizette Johnson. She is an intimate partner murder survivor. And after spending about 21 years in a very abusive marriage, she was threatened several times of being killed herself. She attempted to leave the marriage several times. She finally exited the marriage safely in October of 2009. And despite some assurances of her husband that all the firearms had been removed from the premises, he shot her several times with a gun that he had hidden before taking his own life. You should know their 9 and 12-year-old children were also in the home at the time. She now serves as a peer advocate in the Injury and Violence Prevention Program at VCU Medical Center. And she's here to talk about her experiences and why this is such an important issue. Lizette, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You drove up from Richmond. This is pretty important for you.
It's very important.
Yeah. Give us a little bit of background on why you are so passionate about this, beyond the obvious.
I think that everyone deserves to be respected, to have a relationship that is mutually fulfilling. And there are so many people we don't even know about that are actually trapped. They're like prisoners of war in their own home. And I'm especially passionate about children because my children did witness this. I've seen the last 5 years of what they've had to go through. My concern when I was leaving was to give them a better, healthier relationship model than what their father and I had together. But after he shot me and shot himself, they've been beyond traumatized. And what they've had to go through will affect them their whole lives. And my question initially was, who will they be in 5 years or 10 years?
Sure.
And now my passion is, who will these children who are living in violent homes be in 5 or 10 or 15 years? And they're going to be taking care of you and me. They'll be the leading members of our society. We hope that they will be. But they're also going to be carrying around tremendous trauma from witnessing these types of events. Now,
we talked earlier, this isn't limited to one segment in our society, correct?
No. For me, I think perhaps abuse happens differently in different segments, different educational segments, different socioeconomic segments. I was a business owner.
Right.
I had 9 employees. I couldn't, even if I had wanted to seek shelter, he knew where to come find me at my office. I couldn't tell my 9 employees I'm going to live at a shelter. I couldn't shut my business down. And he was a very well-respected member of the community. People thought very highly of him. They had no idea what was going on behind closed doors.
So it's a little different picture than what I think most of us would have of someone, a woman, in an abusive relationship.
It spans race, it spans sexual orientation, it spans education, economics. It is a non-discriminatory, it hits everyone.
When you went for help, when you reached out, what was that like?
It was difficult for me because it was mostly a verbally abusive relationship. He was very cunning that way. He didn't want to have marks where people that he worked with and people that he associated with socially would be able to identify him as a domestic abuser. So he was verbally abusive, and I wasn't able to seek a protective order because it was simply my word against his. He was very credible. I just wanted to exit to give my children some peace, to give them the chance at a healthy adult life by taking that element out. I hoped that it would minimize it. Obviously, the end result is that it didn't. But I feel like it was the services that were available. I wasn't aware of them, and that's another thing that really drives me. I wasn't aware that I could access a hotline or that I could make a safety plan. I had no idea what a safety plan was because I didn't self-identify as a domestic violence victim.
Well, it's a bit of a, it's hard to admit that you're in something that's pretty abusive or you failed at something.
I did.
Right.
My parents were married 47 years, and that's exactly, I felt like I was failing at my marriage. I wasn't doing something right. I should have been married a lifetime, because that's what I saw as my model.
Or you internalize it and you must fix it because therefore, you would be successful at that.
Right, exactly.
Tell me a little bit about what has changed since you reached out versus where we are today. I mean, can you do?
Much.
Okay.
For instance, the protective orders, even 5 years ago, it was just on the cusp of changes in protective orders. I think the funding has stepped up domestic violence programs so that there are more prevention programs available, especially on a middle school and high school level, so young adults are aware of what it looks like. And I feel like there is more proactive support available for making a safety plan, so you're just not walking out the door, so you know how to stay safe once you leave, because I mean that is really the most dangerous time.
So at a high, perfect. At a high level, someone watching out there, what do they need to do? What's the safety plan consist of? I mean, how can they start to not just think about, but perhaps act on?
I am a very big advocate, because now that I volunteer with an organization in Henrico County to meet victims at the ER, my goal is to not have them get to the ER. My goal is to have them access a hotline or call into a domestic violence agency, say, this is what's going on with me, I don't know what to do, could you help me? And the services that are available, a court accompaniment, helping with protective orders, sitting down and saying, okay, where can you go? Having your children, my children weren't aware that if something happens, if daddy gets violent, you run to the neighbors. I didn't understand what would have kept them safe, and ultimately, I'd like to say that it's between a woman and a man or two intimate partners. The children are so often. By the grace of God, my children were spared. By the grace of God only. We're talking about children. We're talking about parents who maybe are visiting. We're talking about relatives who maybe she goes to stay with a relative and then the whole family's taken out. We have, policemen are very vulnerable as well when they're responding to a call. So the domestic violence agency, local DV agency they have free counseling available to work through some of these things, and I feel like to reframe, to help someone see sort of the dynamics when you're in it. It's very difficult to see a way out.
Is there training or some sort of informational? I mean, because it's not just the individual that's in the abusive; it's the support structure. It's family, friends. I mean, what can those people look for if they suspect or think? Because I have 51 first cousins. We know all of our stuff. I mean, and so I'm thinking that there's probably members of family or friends that suspect but may not know how to approach.
And I think, I think just being a friend, relative friend, and instead of trying to get them to do something, because most are so caught up in it, they just need somebody to say, I'm concerned about you. I've noticed some things. And if you want to talk, I'm here. And if you're not comfortable with that, you know, there are some domestic violence agencies that you can call anonymously, and they're not going to make you do anything. And just put it out there. You're planting a seed, and it will be, when the time is right, nurtured. And there's such a lack of control in these type of relationships that for someone to come in and say, you need to do this, do that, it just feels like someone else telling them what to do. And I think once everyone gets to a point when they've just had it, and then and I was so fortunate to have friends who watched this evolve and who stood by me, and when the time was right said, you know, I am concerned. My best friend, the week before he shot me, said, I'm concerned that he hasn't gotten all the guns out of the house. Have you checked? Famous last words. I said, I trust him. We've been married 21 years. I trust him. And I don't think it was a matter of trust. I think at that point he'd already made the decision. He was ready to roll with it. And I may or may not have found the gun if I had looked. But she was there for me waiting and never telling me, you've got to leave him. This is what you've got to do. Because leaving is a very precarious time for everyone involved. So leaving may not be the answer right now. And to help, there's nothing, if as a supporting role, they can also call a domestic violence agency, and there's certainly enough information on the internet. I'm personally, there are some danger assessments, and I think it's worthwhile for someone who's in the supporting role, if they go through the danger assessment and are able to answer the questions for that person, on behalf of that person, that they can go to them and say, look, I've looked at this danger assessment and I'm very concerned for your safety and your children's safety.
Is there something that also educates the support individual on what the abuser's sort of capacity or frame of mind might be? Because that is a very precarious situation.
I am actually also a peer advocate at VCU Medical Center's Injury and Violence Prevention Program, and I do, when I'm working with someone in the ER in that capacity, I do help them understand where it's coming from, what his next move is probably going to be. It's very predictable.
Well, folks, as I said, this is a very serious topic. Lisette, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to continue with this topic and discussions. We've got some other guests coming up. We'll be hearing more from Lisette in the future. We'll be right back.